Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar and thank you for joining us. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items. The session will be recorded and everyone is in listen-only mode, but if you have any questions, type them into the questions pane and we'll address them toward the end of the session. I'm Helen Schwartz-Grossman, Marketing Manager at Worldox, and I'm very excited to introduce our guest speaker and panel moderator today, Ari Kaplan, for discussion on using financial data to give your firm a competitive advantage in 2022. Ari is an attorney and legal industry analyst. He's an inaugural Fast Case 50 honoree, a fellow of the College of Law Practice Management, and a finalist for ILTA's Thought Leader of the Year Award. He's the author of Reinventing Professional Services, Building Your Business in the Digital Marketplace, and the Opportunity Maker Strategies for Inspiring Your Legal Career through Creative Networking and Business Development. Ari also serves as the principal researcher for a variety of widely distributed benchmarks reports, hosts the virtual lunch daily on Zoom, and has been a keynote speaker for events worldwide. And he is the founder of the Law Accountability Business Development Software Platform and iPhone app. Ari is joined by Lydia Flocchini and Michael Grupp today. And Ari, it is my pleasure to hand it over to you to introduce everybody else on the panel.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I feel like I should have you come over to my house for dinner so that everybody can hear all those wonderful things. Thank you, Ella. It's really fun to be here. I love joining my friends at Worldox. I'm especially fortunate today to be joined by Lydia Flocchini, the Chief Marketing Officer at SurePoint Technologies, and of course Michael Grupp, the CEO of BRYTER. I had the privilege of collaborating with these two organizations and of course with BigHand as a consortium to really try to understand what chief financial officers and legal finance leaders at law firms are focused on, what the trends are, what kind of innovation strategies they are addressing for a report called Implementing Financial Intelligence to Give Law Firms a Competitive Advantage in 2022 and Beyond. There were 20 CFOs that I spoke with, 7 finance directors. Some of those are actually acting as the CFO of their organization, and then 3 accounting managers. The law firms ranged from 12 lawyers to 1,500 lawyers, but the median was about 100. And we really got some wonderful data. We were trying to figure out some key factors. What is the role of the law firm financial leader? What kind of influence are they wielding in this market? What about profitability? What are firms doing there? How are they leveraging financial intelligence? And I'm just honored to kind of turn this over to our panelists. Lydia, let's start with you. Thank you so much for being part of this and supporting this research. What changes are you seeing in the way that law firm financial leaders approach their work?
Oh, Ari, thank you. I'm delighted to be here and to be on this panel with Michael. So this is fantastic. It's so interesting when you ask that question, because I do believe in really looking at what's happening across the legal industry in this last, 2 years now, almost close to 2 years. The transformation to virtualization to now even work, hybrid work models has really put the CFO and financial leaders at the forefront. And when if I have to think of broad themes of how their role has changed, or the transformation that they're leading, change agent, first of all, really being change agents when it comes to culture transformation. And we're seeing that with really being the ones to lead a data-driven culture. And that has many layers to it. It's the technology that enables being able to have that data-driven approach. It's adoption of technology. It's having transparency throughout the law firm in being able to talk about the numbers, being able to share the insights to develop strategies. And so, we see that piece of it in terms of change agent. But then, on the other hand, there's the piece of being the data storyteller. It's the person that is trusted, the advisor, to be able to see what the patterns are, the trends, and the picture that is being painted in terms of future growth. And so the level of trust and responsibility that is being, and even more so now, in the CFO is, the scope of it is very, very large. In fact, I'll just say one stat that stood out to me is that now CFOs have 60% of the respondents that they are involved in tech decisions. And I always think of this one quote that I love from the paper where this financial leader said, I do everything except practice law. So it really speaks to what we're seeing and the impact of their roles.
Yeah, and as you can see here, when I asked, has your job changed due to the pandemic? A number of them, more than a third, yes. Has your job changed beyond the traditional remit of a law firm financial leader? More than 40%. So as you say, Lydia, this it's really in flux. This particular position has this skill set required for CFOs and financial leaders in law firms changed. Look at that number, 2/3. Michael, what skills would you say are in highest demand now for law firm financial leaders, and why does that matter?
Yeah, great question, Ari. The original skill set was a little bit, be the accountant almost of the law firm. So you had this image of a more traditional role, basically the head of numbers. And what we thought and hoped for with the report was to show how that role has emerged into a more consulting and strategic consulting role of somebody that has more of an oversight of the full picture, and also turns then into a strategic consultant to the firm. And this has been confirmed 100%. So we see more and more skills that are in the operational and strategic area, other than just Excel sheets and numbers being required. And I think this is shown by the report that says, yeah, clearly, it has changed, and we are now going into an area where I think it's a more of a team of specialists running law firms and taking decisions where the CFO has a seat at the C-level table, and that's a good sign, I think, because lawyers are increasingly allowing also third-party opinions and third-party guidance at the steering wheel, which I think we all know will bring the drive and the acceleration that the industry is looking for, and where other industries already have gone, and having not just the domain expertise and the strategic guidance, but also the actual professionalism that you need for that role. So yeah.
Given that you're both,
I was going to mention something. Something that's interesting, Michael, as you're talking through their skill sets. We also look at trends where now financial leaders, have to really think about the compliance that's involved, data governance. ESG presents so many layers to, making sure that as the firm looks at those initiatives, the role that they play. So, it's really interesting to see this data, because you absolutely, see this come to life in so many different ways in how that remit is now just on a completely different level than the traditional role of the CFO.
I was going to say that given that you're both working with so many different organizations, so law firms and others, is there something about the practice of law? I guess, Michael, I'll ask you first. Is there something about the practice of law has changed that's required a greater focus on financial acumen?
No, I would say no. It's not the practice of law per se. It is competing in a market that gets increasingly special and also driven by specialists and increasingly competitive. It's not about the practice of law itself. Like, lawyers are overly focused on product, right? They're overly focused about their expertise and delivering the expertise. But McDonald's arguably doesn't do the best burgers in the world, but is the biggest burger seller. Like, maybe coffee at Starbucks is amazing, but it's probably not the best one you could find. And the reason why Starbucks is successful is not the best coffee. It's, distribution models, strategic structures, go-to-market, procurement, like a number of very key drivers that make these organizations successful in the long term and at scale. And law firms have discovered that. So the role of the CFO as the one that has the full financial picture and all KPIs is the one that now is able to drive forward that full picture, and also be the ones that kind of sees it all and is able to consult and report on that. And that's, I think, the thing that we see. Being a better lawyer has stopped to make the core difference in the go-to-market. Operational excellence, strategic go-to-market have shown to have more value. This is not the topic of the conversation here, of course, because we focus on the CFO, but this is also true for the CMO of the operations. This is a more, I think, grown-up role of the CTO or CIO of the firm that has shown in the last 18 months that they have a more important role that is more than just, having the digital library at scale, but really like guiding the platform of the law firm forward.
It's interesting that you talk about that because, one of the great things about the research that I love so much about what I do is that I had lengthy conversations with these 30 individuals. So you're talking about 30 plus hours of meaningful discussion. And so I'm going to share some of the comments that people made. You need people skills for team building and collaboration, which is more and more important as staff numbers decrease. And you kind of mentioned that point. You need emotional leadership to manage remote teams. Lawyers can be effective, but it takes a different skill set to understand the productivity levels of staff members. And a lot of people were talking about firms trying to make a judgment about who should need to come into the office, who's okay with working remotely more often. And so these skills tend to be, a really, really important element. Lydia, are there pieces of this role of the law firm financial leader that make it so much more influential these days?
Oh, absolutely. And it's the data piece, it's the analytics piece, because if you are trusting, you have to first of all trust in the data that you're relying on to make decisions about your firm, the strategic vision, the growth, how you are where you're going to invest. And so the financial leader is really the data steward of that, the financial metrics of the firm, being able to understand the profitability drivers from collection realization to billing realization to write-offs. And so what happens is that they are being asked for this data every day. We talk to our own customers who say they are responsible for looking at dashboards and providing real-time accurate data so that they can, so that the managing partners, the shareholders can make decisions. And so the influence that they are, or I would say, the influence that they have throughout the firm is growing and expanding in scope because of that. And so I would say that, the data piece, the analytics piece, and just being able to look across the firm, being able to look across all the different teams and departments and understand, how are they impacting, whether it's, client value and bottom line. And so this is really a cross-functional, I would say, approach in their influence.
And you see, 50% said that their influence they would rate their influence at a 4 or a 5. They're talking about making decisions. Are you involved in the procurement and buying decisions? Michael you both have referred to kind of this idea of being involved in procurement, in buying decisions, having this holistic view across the organization rather than a prior focus simply on, as Michael talked about it, being the numbers person. Michael, how do you see law firms deploying technology differently, in the new year?
Good question. Maybe my favorite question. So I think
I only ask the best questions.
we have two big trends coming, or basically not coming, happening now, that are emerging from a trend into kind of a big topic for both organizations like law firms and corporate legal and compliance departments. The key things that are interesting here is basically internal facing, external facing. So you have the client focus of clients asking for technology or asking for support in technology as soon as it's about their core business. So we see that law firms get asked about digital transformation, strategic questions within their clients. So it's a conversation that partners are increasingly comfortable to have. So if a client asks, how would you advise to solve this through technology, this is something where attorneys increasingly talk about and bring that topic in-house, and then the law firm has that conversation as well and is able to play a role there and not just like leave this out to alternative service providers, but also like IT agencies, etc. So there's this external area. And then on the internal part, you of course have a big shift of technology through the last 18 months. So the question is, how do you communicate and how do you collaborate? Communication has been introduced. I think it's a topic we discussed a lot and everybody knows it. So this has become key. I think there has been a big bump in communication platforms. One of the things that is really interesting is that law firms have moved into digital also for data repositories and having things available for everybody to share, which kind of seemed to be an obvious thing, because the only asset that a law firm really has is their people. Like it's the asset has legs, it's the people, and they can work from wherever they are. I mean, you need a notebook and that's it. You need your brain. Of course, there are exceptions, there are depositions, data rooms, etc. But in general, this is something where you can really work remotely in a hybrid structure. And the last 18 months have shown that law firms can really do this. So I think there was a big push, and our survey has shown that this is the #1 impact of technology, that you can now communicate and collaborate better. And I think we will see more of these infrastructures changing also how law firms are being run, because now you have the data, right? If you don't measure it, it doesn't exist, right? If you don't have the data to actually look in, if you don't have an intake system, for example, you don't know how often you do what, right? If you don't measure how long it takes, you will not be able to change it. So just like how standardization is the first step to actually go into next steps of digitization, automation, we see through that infrastructural change in the law firm now the next step to actually be more digitally ready and introduce even more automation and things at scale in the years to come. So it's like that first step that needed to be done, and very excited to see how this goes further.
One of the things I asked also was, does the CFO have to vet and approve most decisions? 40% said, they're vetting, they're improving. But Lydia, when we asked about profitability, this changed a little bit. When you look to increase profitability over the next 5 years, what are your key levers? My key levers are of course, increasing revenue. What level do you drill down to? They're drilling down to a matter level. But when we asked about measuring profitability, the numbers were quite low. What opportunities are law firms seeing in their focus on profitability and financial acumen?
Well, here is where, and I know we're going to show this step, but what was very illuminating to me is that 17% were not measuring, and then 83% had different methodologies. So, that definitely is an opportunity for all law firms to think about, how do you create, as Michael just mentioned, a systematic approach to measuring. So the question first is, even where you start, what are you going to measure? Understanding what the profitability drivers are, being able to look at historical data to see, as you're on this slide shows, on the firm level, how did profitability trend, at the attorney level, the client level, and looking at all of the metrics that go into that. And so you've got to start measuring it. And then you start collecting data to be able to then start to build a data set that you can start to look at to really learn about your own firm's financial health of, how do we look at profitability? But I will say that efficiency is a key piece to that, and that's where tech comes into play, because you want your attorneys focusing on high value work. You want them taking, not doing those manual tasks that are not enabling them to focus on strategic, high value work for your clients. And that's where you're going to see big shifts in profitability, and you're going to see a change. But first, you got to start measuring, and you have to develop a methodology. And when you ask about opportunity, here is where I see, a very big opportunity for law firms and for the financial leader specifically, to create education across the firm so that everybody understands the role that they play in driving in profitability, but more importantly, in how they deliver client value. So we see that education happening in terms of being able to have systematic approaches, but dashboards that enable everyone to have access to their own profitability data. So I think there's tremendous opportunity, and it's being able to, you know, here we are kind of coming to the beginning of the year, really starting to plan, like look at this, you know, out 18 months and start to develop a process. So,
Michael, why is it important and how critical is it for law firm leaders to focus on the business of law that Lydia is referring to?
Well, it's a bit following on with what I said before, or what also the study has shown in looking at the numbers. You know, just being good at law isn't enough anymore. So you want to have profitability in your organization as a key driver for everything. It will show you how to invest going further. It will show you where to not invest, what to drive further. You know, kind of like start, stop, continue doing kind of KPIs. We're talking about an industry. I mean, you know, whatever I have to say, I always like introduce with the lines that I'm a lawyer by training, right? And I have a big law background, so talking, you know, somehow also like giving feedback to lawyers is always a spiny issue. But if I remember my work before, it was thinking into the next business year. It was thinking about profitability in the sense like how much is there going to be in bonuses and how much is there going to be for the firm. You don't have shareholder value in a law firm, right? You don't have long-term, decade-long investment plans. At least you didn't have that at scale in the last 10 years where people thought really forward and you knew exactly how you would drive this as a company, because you didn't have a direct impact on the value of the company through investment as a normal, like a private organization would have, like, you know, 10 or 20% of turnover to go into R&D projects to increase the product long-term on the market. You were incentivized really short-term. Financial transparency allows you to have a much better planning there, and all of this starts with having measurable intakes everywhere and have more clarity. This allows you to steer the organization forward. This allows you to be more strategic in hiring, and also you know, things that lawyers often oversee when they think about what makes the firm successful. Is a successful brand, is some marketing initiatives, like where to go to market, where to invest, in what areas to go. So all of these aspects have been accelerated through financial clarity, and you know, profitability is one of them, but it's all of the metrics that you want, that other organizations are already leveraging, that you want as a law firm today. And to be very honest, like, lawyers are not good with Excel, right? You want the financial dashboarding of people that are the stewards and the people that are actually helping you to read the data. And I think this is where the CFO is the consultant and consigliere at the partner table.
And I'm seeing some notes here. Yes, Lydia, please.
I was going to say, you know, what's interesting, just when I'm thinking about this data, and Michael, when we were talking about culture change, is that here's an opportunity for lawyers to learn, you know, how they manage their book of business by understanding this data, being able to analyze, you know, kind of a self-analysis, right? Of what am I doing well? Where, you know, am I managing expenses? Am I, you know, what happens if we were doing write-downs or write-offs? And so I think that just having that information helps you change behavior. But there was something in the report that I thought was very interesting, where one of the leaders said, you know, we can diagnose a problem and then take actionable steps. And it wasn't framed in a way of, you know, of a negative. It's more like, how do we help someone and coach them and give them the tools to be successful, to be a successful lawyer? So I think that the data really enables a shift in change and mentoring, and especially in this hybrid world where, you know, you've got new attorneys coming, new associates coming to firms, being able to use this to learn, I think is just really a game changer when you think of that culture shift.
Well, the report is wonderful in the sense that it takes you through the arc of the role of the financial leader, the influence of a person in that role, the focus on profitability and the need to concentrate on the business of law, and then what kind of practical steps you can take to leverage financial intelligence. As you know, right? So other than financial, are you pulling other data? People are doing this. They're pulling different pieces of data into their decision making. So organizations that are behind or not sure should speak to their peers and try to understand, where are you pulling data? How are you leveraging it? How is it helping you build trust? As we know, we looked at that fact. Lydia, what's the best way for firms to manage their information to draw the most effective insights?
Well, before you can manage it, you've got to start. You have to know, what do you want to measure? And I know we've mentioned this already, but it truly, you really need to start there. So first, what are you going to measure? What are those KPIs that you want to look at? Previously we looked at the slide that had by, client level, matter level, attorney level, and then within that, expenses and, collections and billing and AR and your cash flow. But and this could be applied to, I'm just talking about financial metrics, but there could be, a myriad of metrics within the firm that you want to measure. And then you've got to start gathering and collecting that. You have to identify where this data is. And that's where when we talk about transparency and about having a culture change, we, for example, there was a customer we had talked to who very long, had been looking at data in different places. Had to actually go to 14 places to look at the data. So, but going through that process to be able to say, where is it? I'm going to collect it. I'm going to analyze it so that we can see the trend. So, but in terms of managing the data, you should really think about having it in a centralized ecosystem, because this is the thing. The data you have to have a source of truth. If the data is being in different places, you're not looking at it in the same data set. You're looking at, disparate pieces of information. And so putting it in a central place where you can make sure it's accurate, it's real time, that you can run reports and that the output will be the same is critical to the trust building and the data storytelling and being able to look at patterns for the future. So big, lots to think about there, but you just have to outline the process. And it's something I've been doing for many years with law firms. And so it's great to be able to talk about it in this way right now.
And your point about a single source of truth is critical. Forgive me, Michael, go.
No, good. Just a comment on what Lydia said, because it's nicely aligned also with the question before that we discussed of the more empowered financial leader in a law firm. There's one thing that is really nice to see here. Remember how we have a big discussion about legal operations in the legal department in the last 3 to 5 years that has kind of emerged as a new role, somebody who supports. So the interesting thing is that legal operations managers are always seen as kind of more project managers almost, but also the dashboard people in the legal departments. So they're typically reporting to the head of legal or head of compliance in the teams, but they're seen to be more like a project manager type role. So the interesting thing is that the trend to have more operationally focused people is not just there for legal, it's also there in other teams like sales, marketing, etc. You all have operations functions. So here's the interesting thing. These people typically report to the CFO in these organizations. So they're actually project manager type roles that are embedded in the vertical teams, but they are reporting to the financial leader because they're almost like human versions of dashboards and KPIs. So they're the ones who actually create data visibility in an organization, but they're embedded because you need some domain expertise in the vertical departments to actually be able to understand what you want to measure, what good looks like, to have a healthy benchmark of what you're looking at. So they're they're almost like a more granular level of the CFOs. And that is interesting because we see that pattern in the report as well, where you see that the CFO role needs more visibility, and that also means that you need more KPIs than just financial KPIs. You need more departmental insights that are not financial data. They're different ones, and you need then to kind of correlate those data with your financial data points to actually be able to see what good looks like and what success in that role looks like. So in a law firm, we don't talk about legal operations in the law firms, right? It's interesting because technically I tell you, this is one of the trends we will probably see, that you have also embedded operational functions in the specific areas of the firm to make sure that you connect your just number data with also operational excellence in the different departments. And I just wanted to have this as my 22 prediction that these things will be talked more.
Well, Michael, just to continue this point for a second, I've learned so much from you about what it takes to successfully run a remote first organization. And you see here that the leaders that I spoke with talked about accessing financial data in a hybrid world. How important, like how do you see law firms adapting to this hybrid workplace?
If I'm very honest, I think this was one of the questions where I was slightly surprised, because why is data more important in a hybrid world? Is it less important because you can see people physically on a hallway? Like, is it less important because people have a coat hanging over the chair? Like, I'm not sure about, like, it just maybe shows us that we do now have more data. So suddenly, because you have it, you also find it more interesting to actually measure it. It's like a play that you know, sometimes you're like, we discussed this before, where you think about, we need to know what good looks like and have the courage to also kind of be able to execute on and bring change to actually then say that it's worth looking into the data to actually measure it. And I think in a virtual world, you have more data because you just have it virtualized, you run systems, you have more data. So also you're more inclined to measure and to execute on top of data without having this kind of gut feeling approach of everyday ops. And this is maybe why people in a virtual world are more like looking at data and are more data driven, maybe just because that's all you have, right? It's the thing you have. You can't physically see people. Yeah, that's one thing. On the other thing, I think the hybrid world, as you already asked, I think culture is more important in a hybrid structure, and you need to be more cautious about having culture right in a hybrid structure. It's actually dangerous to think that just because you had culture in a physical workplace and then you go hybrid, that you kind of replicate what you did before through some virtual initiatives, like, you know, Friday drinks or some sort of a raffle once a month. That's or, you know, chat software. But you need to think about that culture works differently in the remote setup, and this is something you need to be very cautious about. And you need to think a lot about. It's you know, people have that joke about people actually not working from home, but being at home trying to work. So not having actually rebuild a really good virtual workplace, but just more like surviving virtually, and then but being an organization that's actually, you know, physical, and it just waits to go back to physical. So I think it's a complicated topic, the whole virtual world. To really succeed long term, it takes a lot of effort.
But you know, Michael, I was in oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, forgive me, Lydia. Please.
Mary's not used to our level of discussion here. Like,
I love it.
This is fun. This is great. So, but I do think, you know, it's interesting when you think of the shift from non-remote, you know, pre-pandemic to, you know, remote, and now hybrid. And I think that, you know, being able for firms to look at that data and start to make decisions about, do we want to go for a completely virtual, right? Or what does that look like? It's being able to look at, you know, what the metrics were in, you know, the before times, you know, what it was like when everyone was virtual and now. And so, you know, we are starting to see this trend of firms going virtual, you know, so it's interesting. We will see what the future holds. So I'm with Michael. I believe that we will start to see more firms that make decisions, say, we're going to go virtual, maybe just have, you know, one physical office, but move towards that virtualization. So I agree with that. Interesting.
Well, one of the things that when we try to craft, you know, the questions and to reach out to this audience, what we try to do is try to figure out, how's your role changing? What does the influence look like? Where's profitability fit in this? How does financial intelligence fit in? But also, what about the data and the technology helps to build trust? Lots of people talked about this idea of telling a story. How do you tell a story with data? How do you tell a compelling story that will get people to adopt your point of view, or at least consider other points of view? And someone said, you know, the CFO is being asked to look at the firm's portfolio in ways that run the business better. Do you think you have access to the data you need to make informed business decisions? Many feel that they do. Do you think reliable data can help law firms gain a competitive edge? Yes, it does. So Lydia, why is trust now so important for law firm leaders, and what impact is data having on that desire to build trust?
Well, because you have to make, if you're going to make decisions about the future of your firm, and decisions about your investment, decisions on how you're going to explore new practice areas. You know, your business development, you have to rely on accurate data and current data. Can you imagine if you are asked by the managing partner to, you know, provide an analysis of, you know, new areas of growth or new areas where you might want to maybe open an office, or, you know, maybe the firm's looking at a new practice area or industry, and all of a sudden you have data that is just is bad. I mean, your trust is eroded in that moment. I mean, it is. And so this is where having that information, and why it's important clearly to rely on it, on timely data, is key for that, building that trust. And so I think, you know, the report has some really great pieces or quotes from some of the respondents on this piece. So, yeah.
Michael, as someone that's built a company and really responsible for a global professionals team, how can law firm leaders create a culture of trust?
Yeah, that's a hard question. So trust, you know, is about being predictable. You know, fear comes from, if you don't know what's going to happen, even though the consequences may not be that bad, but not knowing what is out there, this is what creates fear. And so uncertainty is the big thing to avoid. And the other way around, trust builds on predictability, on that little incentive that you get if you expect something, and this is happening. And this happens a lot in people. When you expect them to act in a certain way, and they do, it creates trust that you can rely on this. And one important thing here is, of course, to have a higher level of transparency in things you do. It is a key thing that you would often assume people know, but in an increasingly big organization, people just don't. And then out of the uncertainty comes the lack of trust. So the number one thing is really overshare information, overcommute. I sometimes ironically say, like, big part of my job is just to repeat the same things over and over again. I really think that. And while you think it's boring, it's actually not that bad, because people always think they heard it for the first time, right? And for the second time, they might just remember it. So over communicate, overshare, have more transparency in things you do is a key thing in building trust. The number two thing is, and that's maybe interesting for, if you think about it, like, you need to have the right people. Like, you need to think about having the right group of folks that, for example, works in a virtual world that is happy like that and wants to work like that, to actually be able to then build a culture of trust. So you have to, while hiring, think about that you're building a remote organization, and while hiring already think about that these are the people that are going to be the stewards of your culture in your organization. We at BRYTER, we had a really good 2 years where the organization was somewhat exploding. So we went from 40 people pre-pandemic to we just sent 280 Christmas presents out. So it looks like a multiplication in the last 20 months. And
I hope 281. No.
These are the different presents. This is like a different swag pack, Ari. It's a bigger one.
I understand.
So,
fine.
If you do this, if you see this, you suddenly have people that are onboarding people that just got onboarded, right? You have probably like people telling people about culture that just were about to experience it themselves. So this only works if you have a really extreme, very like explicit culture-focused strategy where you think about what the culture is, make it explicit, and overly share it. And this only works with a set of people that are suitable for that. And this is where where organizations that had to survive the last 18 months have my compassion, because they were not able to hire people made for that, like wanting to work in that environment, right? We're in a luxury position, because if you click on a BRYTER job ad, this is a virtual company. So people that want to work virtually, they are the ones who join it. There are people who can do that. Last comment there is, you need to have a certain level of seniority. Like, if you're just starting your first job role, that's hard, because you, in a virtual world, it's almost like every negative thing of a virtual working is double hard for you. Solitude, no level of control and guidance, like even the kind of subtle things. You can't even mimic people easily. You can't follow their lead if you don't see them. So there are many things that are super relevant here in building trust in an organization that is remote or virtual. But also there are many companies that prove that it's working, and that's also a good sign that organizations adapt to that different world. And I think many law firms have shown that it's possible to do this too, although they didn't have like big preparation for that and the ability to build an org suited for that. So I think overall the experience was more positive the last 18 months.
And I would love to just refer the people who are watching to the video of your co-founder, Mick Hubel, on the virtual lunch, because he told a great story about just being a remote first company and the value and the power and the impact. And so anybody who's interested, I'm happy to share that link with you. It's on YouTube, and it's super meaningful. And so one of the things that came up here, on a scale of 1 to 5, how important is it for finance teams to be trusted advisors to partners in management? Gosh, I mean, like, this is a hands down is a critical factor. And Lydia, you kind of talked about this. Can data help become trusted advisors? Absolutely. So there really wasn't a question in the research about the value of data, the impact on the role, the impact that the role that a data empowered financial leader has on the partnership. What you guys have both talked about, there was a convergence in some ways about accuracy. Lots of the people who shared their views for this research also talked about, yes, trust is critical. People listen to what we have to say, but if our data either doesn't have, Lydia, I think as you described it, a central source of truth, or is fundamentally accurate, we could lose credibility very quickly. As deeply as they trust us, we could lose that trust if we don't have something that's more powerful. So we got into this discussion about innovation, about where we're headed given the backdrop of what we've experienced and where people see data driving success at a firm. Lydia, what do you think is going to fuel law firm success going forward?
Well, the more that firms can start to look at the insights that they're getting from the data and start to then automate and move towards prediction is where we're going to see really the road ahead. Being able to say, here's what our cash flow looks like, 3 months out. Being able to predict, what billables are going to come in because of either that specific practice area or the attorney that has developed a pattern of being able of the work that they do. So I believe that the more that the data is being shared and being able to use in a way that informs the strategy, we're going to see this move from manual tasks, automation, prediction. I was going to say one thing that I wanted to know when we were talking about how data can provide a competitive edge. When you are thinking, or a law firm, about alternative pricing models, fixed fee pricing models, and being able to think about, do we introduce new ways to deliver value? Having that historical data empowers you to do that, so that you can present new options for your clients, which gives you competitive edge. So I wanted to mention that because I think that is another area where it drives, innovation, right? Innovating your delivery service model, innovating how you develop new options for your clients. And so just such an exciting time for firms as we move towards becoming data storytelling and analytics, and being able to drive culture change across the firm.
And there were, what percentage of your time do you focus on strategy and innovation? We asked people, and there was a significant group of them, almost 50% are spending 10 to 20% of their time. Lots of discussion about, I wish I spent more time, I wish I could focus on this, but even 20% spending 20 to 30%. So you have financial leaders spending a quarter of their time on some of this stuff. It's really quite impressive. And then I asked, are you exploring other service delivery models as a way to increase profitability? Almost 30% talking about selling products versus selling hours. Michael, What global trends related to innovation and change does this research seem to confirm?
Well, you see that the organizations become more business focused and more specialist focused. We have, with digital transformation happening all over the world, the need and sometimes even the pressure to rethink your structures as they were. And this also means that you need to be just data savvy, ready, more pro. Not just in tech things, but also in how you're setting up your operations, etc. And this is, I think, the big confirmation that the report shows. People sometimes think that digital transformation is about tech, but tech is always the means to an end. It's like the how to get there, but the what, the why is still the thing that you need to answer yourself. It's the same with CFO. Like it is somebody who embodies two functions: the measuring, like the procuring of the data, but then at the end, it's about what is good looking like. What's the goal? Why do we do this? Where do we want to go? What are the key benchmarks we're aiming at? And these are the big trends. When we talk about digital transformation, it's about streamlining, also reducing costs, increasing profitability, etc. But it's about, like, first of all, like being able to participate there, to do this digitally, and to leverage technology for that. And if you want to leverage technology, the number one question everybody asks in the procurement process is why? Where does it save you money? Where does it add money, right? And so you need to know, like, this is where we are, this is where we want to go, this is the money we want to save, this is what we want to have more in earnings. So the kind of digital transformation kind of begins and ends with, again, somebody in charge to have the data and to give the why an underpinning in terms of numbers and funding. We always joke that if you really want to get funding, you want to ask for budget, you need to ask your CTOs or CIOs, because they are the creative people and actually procuring things, because they're just very good in showing ROI, because they constantly need to buy software. They have learned how to buy software, how procurement works. Lawyers don't know that yet, right? So they need also a CFO function to actually understand concepts of return on investment and to actually be ready to participate. Because so big topic, of course, is like bringing tech to organizations, but the how is a question of ROI, the why is a question of ROI. So this is like a ping pong of the financial leaders and the strategic leaders of why to do all of this, and then tech is the answer. And that I think is mirrored in the report. There's one thing I just want to comment from a BRYTER perspective, is that when we initially said, where's technology impacting law firms? And we said that internal thing, better collaboration, better communication, that's 100% true. But now one thing we see is, of course, that lawyers are starting to communicate with their clients about digital transformation, what law firms can do for their clients. And there we do see a shift in terms of having different offerings, not just maybe sell your hours, but maybe people go into asset-based consulting. They also have digital assets they sell. We see client portals, we see digital front ends, we see also law firms supporting and selling applications to their client that are helping them on a self-service basis for some things. We see law firms like Clifford Chance with like big application development teams that are supporting the high level, very bespoke consulting with very digital applications. That's very, very innovative, very new, and I think not just a trend, but just like a movement of some law firms spearheading that development. And this is also confirmed by the report. The question that you see here is that it's still a third that says yes, but it is like a fourth, like 25% that say yes. And this is a very interesting development that traditionally very consulting and semantic and text and explaining heavy industry things about scalability in their service offering. That's very interesting, and I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'll stop here, but you can tell.
No, when I asked about this, of course, I asked about the use of technology, and people talked about the main driver being an increase in efficiency over transparency, over risk avoidance, an increase in transparency. Efficiency. I changed it around a little bit, and I put a QR code. So feel free to take a picture of the screen, and you can download a copy. Well, you can sign up to get a copy of the report when it's released. I want to just, we have a minute or two for questions, and several questions have come in. Lydia, I think this one is really designed for you, and it's a question about profitability. Why is it important for law firms to emphasize profitability?
I would say, well, I guess let me think about it, address it this way. Law firms have to think of their clients first. They have to think about how are they going to deliver the most value, greater value for their clients. That's their job, right? Their profitability plays into it when you're thinking of how does the firm, look at drivers which enable their profitability. But that profitability is not going to happen, right? If you're not getting new clients, growing your existing book of business, getting, thinking of, what are other areas to represent your clients. So it's an interesting question in that I believe profitability will flow if you are delivering the best client service that you can and innovating new ways to do that. So, but on this call or on this webinar, we're talking about profitability in terms of, or at least the way I'm thinking about it from the report is, how do you learn about the profitability drivers so that you can be a successful firm in terms of that part of it. But it's not on its own. It has to go. It has to flow. It has to come from client service. So I think that that's the part that I would emphasize, and then where it comes from that in terms of how you innovate the way that you are practicing law, and then the business of law.
Michael, we have one. Oh no, that was great, Lydia. Michael, we have you hit the last word here. Someone wanted to follow up on what you just said. Do you expect more firms to be changing their delivery models to remain competitive?
100%. Clear yes. Why? Because, if you think about it that way, most law firms are selling their wisdom and the delivery form, like the delivery model they're doing that is, of course, charging by the hour. That's like probably not going away, but you use Microsoft Word like a digital typewriter. Like you think about things basically, and then you describe them, Word, and then you attach it, and then you send it out. Clients have started to experience different ways to consume consulting, to consume knowledge. Like the strategy consultants have gone into asset-based consulting to deliver digital assets and then consult on top. This can be, products, this can be workflows, this can be even teams. The alternative legal service providers are already offering a multitude of offerings and portfolio offerings that are not standard legal products anymore, that are different and hybrid ones. So law firms are clearly the last ones to do this because they're at the core conciliaries. But this is changing now, and clients are very open for these things. I give you two examples where this is happening fast, and one where this is happening very slow. So where law firm partners, like strategic conciliaries, which they are and which they continue to be, but where a law firm partner has an insight into the operational work of a client. So this is like where you see the tens of thousands of requests coming in somewhere. This is the case in compliance and IP and employment law especially. This is where a consultant sees an operational challenge at their clients. And this is where we already see digital solutions being a part of discussions, where law firms, especially employment law, partners propose digital solutions to handle these legal requests at scale with a client. On the other hand, where don't we see this? Where law firms don't have an insight into that, 10,000, 20,000 people buzzing us in your client. Why? Because you're transactional support, because you do M&A deals, because you're talking to the GC and to the CEO level, and it's about a transaction. You may not even know exactly how your client works on a day-to-day basis, because you don't have to, because it's about M&A, it's about private equity, it's about very pointy, very non-very frequent, very complex quadrant problems to solve. And this is, of course, where automation doesn't have a play, and digital delivery models won't have a big role. Why? Because it will remain highly bespoke consulting work, because you can't automate it really at scale. But where lawyers have this insight, we see many of these things happening in the law firms. It's very interesting. Like as soon as a law firm has that focus on more supporting on an operational level, you see them you see them also thinking about different delivery models. So I say yes, it's 100% happening, and I'm very curious how we would have this conversation in 12 months.
Well, I'm Ari Kaplan, and it's been a privilege. It was a privilege for me to speak to the law firm finance leaders that I spoke with, and I'm grateful to them. I'm grateful to Worldox for producing this event, and of course to Michael Grupp, the CEO of BRYTER, and to Lydia Flocchini, the Chief Marketing Officer at SurePoint Technologies, and thanks to SurePoint, BRYTER, and BigHand for supporting this research. I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Lydia.
Bye. Thank you.
And thank you, Ari, Lydia, and Michael. Thank you so much for sharing all the information and the results of your research with us today. We are posting a recording of the session, and hope that everyone will take another look. If anybody missed it, they can see it again and join us next time, and also join Ari for his virtual lunch sessions. You can find more information on social media on that. Thank you very much.